I believe Prem is going to go ahead and take it away. It's all yours, Prem.
Thank you. I'm Prem Devnu. I'm a professor of computer science at UC Davis. It's my pleasure to welcome Ms. Fatima Kardar to speak to us today. She's general manager and chief technology advisor to Microsoft's chief technical advisor to Microsoft CTO Kevin Scott. She's worked at Microsoft for more than 19 years in various product and engineering roles. She has a passion for technology, for making a positive impact on the world, and for building innovative products that solve real problems. She's also passionate about the role of culture and of diversity and inclusion, both at work and outside. She's the D&I executive sponsor for her division and supports various company-wide diversity programs. She's also a mother to two little girls. She has earned an undergraduate degree from the Lahore University of Management Sciences and an MBA from Duke University. Welcome, Ms. Kardar.
Hi, nice to be here. So I should try to share my screen again, right? Let's try that.
Exactly. And share screen at the bottom, and then go ahead and share your screen. We'll let you know how it looks.
And
it looks great. We can see your main slide, and that's it. Looks perfect.
Perfect. So let's get it. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm actually really excited to talk about the importance of diversity and inclusion. That's what Andrew reached out to me and asked me to do. And of course, I can't ever say no to talking about that stuff. As mentioned, I'm Fatima. I'm a software engineer by profession. So I feel pretty privileged to be at this conference because I do think myself as a software engineer. And of course, I'm the chief technical advisor to Kevin Scott. I consider myself privileged. I grew up in a patriarchal society, but with surprisingly strong female role models. Throughout my life, I have challenged what was expected of me and feel proud of having broken through many glass ceilings. I have personally both benefited from allies who supported me and been discriminated by well-intentioned but misguided people. I believe that given the right opportunities, most people are capable of doing amazing things. That diversity and inclusion is not one person's job. It is imperative on all of us to create an inclusive playing field. And it is my responsibility as a leader to be the multiplier to everyone's effort so we can together move the needle in substantial ways. I'm excited to be here because I want all of you to walk out not just energized, but also equipped with some tools and ideas to become that multiplier yourself. Diversity and inclusion is a topic that many of us at Microsoft are passionate about because it is core to our mission to empower everyone on the planet to achieve more. To bring people together and help them achieve their potential requires a diverse and inclusive culture. And it's not an afterthought or a nice to have. It's core to what we do as software engineers. Diversity encompasses many aspects of what makes us different, such as race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, neurodiversity, education, age, and so much more. And it might be obvious, but it's worth stating that you can build better products if the composition of the team building these products is representative of who they're serving. In studies dating back to the 2000s, the less collaborators had in common initially, the more they came up with ideas that were out of the box. And in the academic arena, often higher education and research thinks that diversity is good for students. It is, but studies also show that like businesses, research environments also benefit from diverse and inclusive cultures. Research also shows that diversity is a key driver of innovation because it encourages different perspectives and ideas. Let me make this very real for you. You may have heard of a study by Joy Bolamwini and Timnit Gerbu on the error rate of facial recognition systems. They found that the AI gender classification products discriminated based on race and gender, with higher accuracy for male faces versus female and on lighter skin versus darker skin, with the worst accuracy on darker female faces. Machine learning is only as good as the datasets you train on, and the datasets used lacked much of the representation for women and people with darker skins. And the developers on the team didn't notice the disparity before they shipped. If there had been more dark-skinned women on the team, someone would have thought to check this. The ramifications of such lack of diversity are massive, as law enforcement and justice systems are using these images in some cases to make arrests and sentencing decisions. But the training sets are based on historically systematic racist sentencing practices. They reinforce the fact that dark-skinned men are likely to reoffend and should therefore be sentenced to longer jail statements. And contracts with the AI providers restrict judges from flexible sentencing, even when they know that software is making unfair predictions. Thus, it's essential for us to increase the diversity of engineers and data sets, to improve those systems, and frankly, to prevent violation of fundamental civil liberties. And it's becoming increasingly more important as millennials join our workforce, as they all have high expectations for inclusive cultures. On the other side, including diverse perspectives from people of all abilities can create positive impact. For example, the Seeing AI app that helps customers use smartphone cameras to understand the world around them. This project was led by Saqib Sheikh, a visually impaired engineer who could use his own personal experience as input for a tool to enable people who were blind or with low vision to achieve more with freedom and confidence. I have had the personal privilege to work with Saqib. He is passionate about making sure that the products we build serve the needs of people with all abilities. And the added benefit of increasing accessibility for people of all abilities is that these innovations help everyone. The voice recognition software that enables someone who has an arm amputated also helps someone with a temporary disability like a broken arm, or even someone holding a baby in one hand. And at Microsoft, our commitment for inclusion goes broader than just our workforce. We feel that we have a social responsibility to support equity and equality of access to technology. The COVID crisis has made it necessary for many in the workforce to shift from working from home full time. But what if you live in a community with limited internet access, or have no access to computers, or even lack the digital literacy training and education? We must take positive steps we can today to fight for a more equitable future. And we must ensure that everyone can participate in building the future of AI and technology with adequate education and agency to participate in the process of its evolution and governance. And our work must be inclusive. Building products free of unintentional bias can also help users develop an understanding of the ways that AI might be influencing their interactions with the product. We're investing in programs and efforts designed to attract a diverse group of people to work here, placing a premium on creating an inclusive environment in order to create technologies that are very intentionally include rather than inadvertently exclude. And we celebrate and value diversity and believe it's a core accelerant for what we do. An inclusive culture means that everyone's unique resources are recognized and routinely utilized in achieving the goals, that people feel valued, respected, included, and encouraged, that people experience a culture without bias and in and out groups, that people are included and rewarded as part of the team because of their differences in outlook, perspective, and background, because they are seen as adding value. And it's not enough actually to claim that you support diversity and inclusion. You must do the work to make it real. And this kind of change takes time. This is the model that we use for our own culture change. We address each of these components in an intentional way, in an ongoing manner. And we're investing in our evolution. There is no end point. Rome wasn't built in a day. And this is not a short-term proposition. Change takes time, and culture evolution is just that, an evolution. We view it as an intentional cycle which we apply to in an ongoing way. At a high level, here's our approach with levers for creating lasting change. We encourage inclusive behaviors and habits that are supported by systems with symbols to reinforce the right behaviors, all underpinned by collective storytelling. I'll go into each of these in a bit. Let's start with behaviors. Behaviors and a new way of thinking requires practice. We focus on setting up mechanisms and conditions for the behaviors in such way that over time, desired behaviors become second nature. They become habits. One of the behaviors that we're currently focusing on at Microsoft is allyship. We consider allyship such a key behavior in advancing conversations that lead to change that we have made allyship core to our diversity and inclusion efforts and a major investment for us as an organization. We saw the opportunity to use allyship as a strategic catalyst for true cultural transformation through habit forming, building on ongoing conversations, insights and failures, and recovery and learning. Here's an example of our learning path at Microsoft. In July 2019, we launched allyship at Microsoft with a series of learning opportunities to become more informed and effective allies. What this does is create and establish shared language and understanding. An ally is someone who makes the intentional decision to understand, empathize, and act in support of someone else. It's not a person's identity, rather, it's a lifelong commitment. And part of being an ally is recognizing your own privilege and using it to lift others. Anyone can be an ally by helping somebody else voice in a meeting, inviting others to broaden their understanding of a situation, or interrupting microaggressions. You can actually even be an ally to someone by standing up for them when they're not present to be able to represent yourselves. And frankly, some of my biggest allies have been people who stood up for me when I was not in a room to defend myself. Sorry. Allyship is a necessary building block for culture that celebrates diversity and helps everyone feel included. We also look at the kinds of behaviors that we can encourage through our tools and processes and how we reward people. Practices, routines, rituals get adopted over time and become habitual ways of doing things around here. One area where many struggle is with hiring diverse candidates. We frequently hear that there aren't enough diverse candidates in the pipeline, but this is often a challenge of continuing to look in the same places where you've always looked, your personal networks. Often these networks are full of people who look like us, who went to the same school, who come from the same backgrounds. On my team, we're creating a training to help people diversify their networks, to make connections with people outside their regular contacts. And foremost, this requires people to acknowledge their personal bias and help them learn to screen in great talent versus screen out because they don't meet preconceived notions. We're also looking for ways to increase the potential pool of candidates by participating in movements for inclusion and providing mentorship for less privileged students. People with privilege know that the path to higher tech success lies in higher education. People with less privilege don't even know where to start. Here's another example of a program at Microsoft. Microsoft Research India created a year-long undergraduate intern program to train students in research. Then, they helped these students and interns apply to CS graduate schools in the US. India doesn't have a strong tradition of CS graduate schools, which all but eliminates the pipeline for local talent for PhD hires in our Microsoft Research India. All the researchers are educated in the US or Europe. However, through this program, once the students earned their PhDs, some came back to work as researchers in India. Here's a picture of me with a group of WNBA players. You might be wondering why. We have a program at Microsoft called LEAP that has grown out of an incubation on my team. The Microsoft Leap apprenticeship program's mission is to recruit, develop, and train non-traditional talent for employability into the technology sector. It's an immersive 16-week apprenticeship for those who have like a foundation in technical training. But this apprenticeship program applies like in classroom learning with hands-off engineering projects. Like you get to work with real teams on real projects within all of our organizations like Azure, Xbox, Bing, Office. These participants might previously have been nurses, business leaders, stay-at-home parents, or even basketball players. But they all bring experiences and skills from outside the technology industry that help broaden our understanding and strategies. Another example is Melissa Kyrie. She was a single mom employed as a casino dealer. After 10 years, when she was laid off, she decided to use that opportunity to go back to school and better herself. She hadn't ever considered being in the technology industry. After all, she did not write her first line of code until she was in her 30s. However, I'm happy to say that Melissa was hired as a program manager at Microsoft after completing her apprenticeship with the LEAP program. Next, let's talk about symbols. Performance rewards reinforce our cultural values. Every employee at Microsoft has a core priority focused on diversity and inclusion. And within our teams, the impact of an individual's effort to support D&I is reflected in their performance reviews and promotability. We use symbols as a reminder and help create meaning. They can help reinforce the expectations for behaviors and systems. One of our D&I symbols include a One Microsoft D&I plan, under which each organization drives initiatives specific to its needs. We have on our team, for example, many of the company's PhD researchers, so we also participate in outreach to increase diversity in higher education through fellowships and partnerships. And everyone commits to doing their part in D&I. And when it comes time for annual rewards, their contributions to diversity and inclusion are considered as part of the process in evaluating their impact over the year. And finally, storytelling. We are passionate about storytelling at Microsoft. We look for every opportunity to tell stories of our culture brought to life, and then to listen and learn from others. We also use internal communications to reinforce the behaviors and actions that we want to see from employees. For example, here's another example. We do org and company-wide events to collectively learn from each other. Our leaders hold themselves personally accountable, not just for their org, but for their own personal behaviors. In a recent internal diversity and inclusion event in our organization earlier this year, one of our executives shared his story that he was in a conversation with the CEO of an organization that he wanted to build a partnership with. Before they started, the CEO and him were chit-chatting, and the CEO complained about the Black Lives Matter movement. And he asserted that George Floyd wasn't murdered. Our exec didn't know how to respond, and he turned the conversation back to work and the potential partnership. But later, when he reflected on the conversation, he felt shame that he had missed the opportunity to create awareness for the need for systematic change. He realized that although he thought he understood what it meant to be an ally, he had not fully committed to take action. It was a powerful story of learning, and his pledge to not step back again deeply impacted the audience. External perceptions of Microsoft, especially those of potential hires, are shaped by the media and other sources. So we also share our progress annually in the Global Diversity and Inclusion Report. This includes our representation data and key D&I priorities. We also talk about the big things we're doing to drive change, such as Satya Nadella's blog on how Microsoft is addressing social justice. And practically speaking, here's how I personally make it real every day. As the diversity and inclusion executive sponsor for my division, my job is to drive culture change and behavior change across leadership and the broader organization. I do this by removing barriers that hinder progress and empowering others to prioritize and focus on what we consider our vital D&I initiatives. However, I can't do this alone, and I don't expect to do it alone. I do it in partnership with an awesome council where all the council members are volunteers who are just passionate about making diversity and inclusion real. They are the ones who are responsible for the activation of our D&I plan across the division, firstly by modeling self-accountability, but then also by influencing leaders to amplify commitments and to drive awareness by communicating consistently across the divisions. They sometimes run trainings, they will go lead efforts in conferences. They're the ones who will step in and kind of help people out in certain situations. So they do a whole gamut of work. Yeah. They're also supported by PMs and V teams who we work with and who are responsible for executing on the actual plan. They provide clarity for D&I experiments and incubations, and we keep doing a whole bunch of those. I mentioned some of them. And then they also are like collaborating with other communities and aligning with grassroots efforts, both that are coming up from the organization. A lot of people at Microsoft care about this, and there's a lot of very good ideas coming out. But also what we call our communities, like our Blacks in Microsoft community, our women's group, and other groups that we partner together with so that we all make sure that we're amplifying what we're doing. And we're proud of the work that we've done so far, but no, it's still more to do. And to drive change both internally and externally, to promote diversity, inclusion, and equity takes time. And we're committed to this journey. This is also a hard journey. Things are not always clear. One of the examples that are the thought-provoking things that I'll kind of put in your head that you should think about is, this is a debate that we've had recently in our organization around inclusion. We had a session with Dr. Relina Joseph, who came in and talked to us about microaggressions and what it means to have microaggressions and how do you as an organization and individuals come and protect it. During that conversation, people talked about their experiences with what they considered microaggressions and how they would counter it. And somebody raised, if now that we are in this COVID world and we're all glued to our screens and most of our interactions with people are over Zoom and Teams, is turning on your camera considered inclusive or is it considered not inclusive? And and what you find is you have people on both sides, and it's a very interesting way to think about it. Some people said that turning your camera on is not inclusive because you don't know the other person's situation. You don't know where they're in, where they can turn their camera on. You don't know what's happening around them, whether they feel self-conscious. So asking or expecting people to turn on cameras is actually not being inclusive. Somebody else actually, when I went and talked to my team, told me that no, actually, I turned my camera on because I want to be inclusive. I want people to be able to see me and my reaction. So I want to put myself out there. And again, that makes sense as well. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is it's a very nuanced situation. It all starts with us kind of getting to know the other person, empathizing with somebody, being their ally, and truly understanding what the impact of our behavior can be, intentional or not, and then how we can all come together to create this very, very inclusive environment. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you today. I'll be happy to take any questions at this point if people do have them.
All right, and Prem, I was thinking I would put you and Fatima in the spotlight here, so you guys can kind of help moderate questions as they come in from the chat. Fatima, do you mind not sharing your screen so we can put your video on the screen?
Actually, could you put Andrew in the spotlight, because I think he's going to handle the questions.
Gotcha, will do.
Yep, I'm here.
All right. So all of our listeners, feel free to start chatting in any questions that you might have, and Andy will be in charge of getting those to Fatima, And I believe we have the right people in the spotlight now.
Yep, it looks good to me. So everyone, at first I'd like to say thank you to Fatima for giving a great talk and a really good perspective all about Microsoft. And so thank you for that. I'll clap.
Like I said, we love telling stories. So this is my opportunity to also tell the story of how we think about this.
Great. Now we have one question in the chat already from James Davis. I agree that greater diversity is critical on engineering teams as we work to solve the pipeline, hiring, and retention problems. How can we build awareness of diversity into our engineering processes? Are those high-profile machine learning failures also due to a culture of move fast, break things, and see which customers complain approach that doesn't work well for public-facing products?
I think we need to this is not just about like data sets or things. I think we need to look at all aspects of creating a diversity. When I look at it, yes, actually we need to acknowledge that as a society we have been racist and biased in the past, and so when we build things based on the data that is collected from that environment, we will run into challenges, and we have to we need to be very proactive about it and conscious about it. At Microsoft, in a case like that, we have something called, we have a whole set of principles around responsible AI. And we've actually created it as a complete different discipline at Microsoft, where we look at not just building products. Exactly, there you go, the responsible AI standard. And we have organizations within Microsoft. We have Ether, which is our group of researchers really thinking deeply about what are the cutting edge challenges. We have our, of course, our compliance and legal and policy people who create the AI standard. And then we have engineers, and we have all of them thinking about these problems to think about like, this is there. Like the AI will be a reflection of what we're doing. What do we do moving forward to counter that? So I think like especially in the AI case where a lot of people don't know, especially with these deep neural networks and so forth, there is a little of black box happening in there. And the best way for us to do it is to really be understanding of what are the things that can go wrong. And if we have people who have different perspectives, they will all come together and think through that, plus with guided principles, standards, the whole work. So it requires all these kinds of things.
Thank you. We have a question from Andrea Vescon. How can we be more inclusive as teachers and teach our students all together, or teach our students about D&I together?
I think the first thing is be able to have that conversation. Like, I think D&I is not going to happen on the side. It has to be front and center of what you're doing. And this actually applies to the academic institutions as much as to organizations. In the earlier days of D&I, there was a whole bunch of, here's this material, we expect people to read it, to learn it, to internalize it. And what we realized, it doesn't work. You have to consciously have a conversation about it. You have for people to know that it's forefront and it's important to them. And it's kind of top of mind for folks, which means that all the dialogues that we have include them, that we're doing communication, that we're doing events. When leaders stand up and talk about this, they really care about it. So that it really starts from that to making sure that everybody understands and can relate to this is important. Second, I think, again, this is something that applies to academics as well as like business organizations, is having a shared and common vocabulary and language to talk about it. I think like concepts like allyship apply in education as well as they do in business. I think the point that might be different is there's a business case for why having those diverse organizations help make better products. I think the same can be said for students. I think if you have students who come from different backgrounds, or you want to encourage students from different backgrounds, you will get a broader perspective, even in academia. We look at the kinds of things we do at Microsoft, or the kind of things we do in a technology industry. Academia is so important. That's why we have Microsoft Research. That's why we love our researchers. They're the ones who are out there thinking about the future. And if they're not out there thinking about the future, given all these different kinds of perspectives, they're not going to be able to come up with all the different ways of doing things. So I think that's something that I do. I think as teachers, like you can first just start with your classrooms and your students and how you expect people to conduct themselves. Have no tolerance for non-inclusive behavior. have an example for like catching and calling out microaggressions. Those are some of the things that might seem small, but those are some of people's lived experiences for what they feel and happen every day, and that will come through as well. So I think it's that. And then I think encourage role models, because I think as teachers, and this is not just kind of graduate school but even lower end, is we need more diversity in our institutions. When people complain that they don't have a diverse network to hire from, the reason that they don't is because there is not enough diversity coming out of academia. So like the case goes all the way through, and so you have to start soon. You have to help people understand why it matters at all levels, because you need to start from academia to go up.
Okay, thank you. From Ayesha Rastogi, what are the major challenges that or can you give us some examples of challenges you've seen at Microsoft in realizing diversity and inclusion initiatives?
Oh, they have been a lot. I think what you have is, in some cases, people think they know what it means to be inclusive or what it means to be diverse, but it very much comes from their own personal perspective. I'll give you like a personal example for myself. I have a 5-year-old, like was mentioned earlier. So I worked at Microsoft for about 13, 14 years before I had her. And when I went on maternity leave for her, I was out for 5 months. I came back, and at that point, I love my daughter. It was amazing, but I was ready to kind of get back into work, do what I needed to, and kind of progress. I'm an ambitious person. I want my career to advance. However, when I got in, what I realized was my manager at the time was making the assumption and thinking he was being inclusive by saying, you need space. You should take all the space you want. You don't have to work hard. It's hard having a new baby, etc., etc. But in his mind, the way he was doing it was by assuming, oh, you probably don't want a promotion right now, because a promotion means additional responsibilities and you have a new baby and it's going to be really hard. And he was doing it in a well-intentioned way. He has 7 kids, and his wife is a stay-at-home mom, and that's what she loves to do. So from his perspective, he's being inclusive. But that was not inclusive for me, because what it did was I felt that like that's not true for me. I actually want the promotion. I want to get further. So I think like those are some of the small things. And the reason I call it out is because when people assume that you're having bad behavior, it's because people are coming from a bad place. They're coming just from a not being like understanding people's perspective. So that's something that we work on all the time, is how do we build those kind of shared understanding so people feel that they're valued. That's one. The other kinds of things that we run into challenges with earlier this year. So this year has been a little hard. We all know we're all working from home. Initially, beginning of the year, there was an economic downturn. We slowed down our hiring within the company because we felt like we wanted to just kind of really stabilize, understand the situation, what was going on. So we actually didn't have a lot of like hiring going on. And what happened was our what we call our global talent acquisition folks, they're the ones who are responsible for what conferences we go into, etc., where we show presence. They decided to scale back on some conferences because they're like, we don't have anything to hire. Usually we use like a big part of why we kind of have a presence in the conferences is because we want to hire talent from there. And they didn't go ahead and kind of sign up to a conference that we consider is a really great place to network with diverse candidates. And through all the changes, we didn't realize until the conference started, and people were like, so I was assuming like we were at this conference, why are we not at the conference? And that was one where like we had to push back on people and really help them understand the point in being in networking and getting to know people is not when you have a position to hire. You have to go get to know those people, build those diverse communities, be people's allies long before it's time to actually go and recruit people. So that was a active conversation and active learning, which required our global talent team to change their metrics. Like that is not the metric by which they decide that they need to be in a conference or not. So that's another kind of a more of a systematic, or like the systems that we had to change. But really this every day is something that we need to do in this. So the challenges keep coming again and again.
Thanks. So I have a question from Malik Naz Nayebi. Given that diversity is essential for many reasons, how can multicultural communities prepare to be more inclusive and welcome individuals with diverse experiences and mindsets? Should we just keep inviting people from different groups, or do we need governance around this?
I think you need some governance. I think governance always helps, but that's actually not enough. I think a big part of being inclusive or saying that you're inclusive is that you need to show it in your day-to-day behavior. That's why we think allyship is so important, because allyship goes hand in hand with a concept called covering. Covering is a concept that you don't feel like you can be your authentic self, or you can kind of reflect who you actually are in a work environment, or in an academic environment. And if people feel that they need to cover, and what you will find is, if you think about it, you have probably covered something about yourself in some situation or the other in your life. So it's not just true of underrepresented minorities, but this is a pretty standard thing. And so if people feel like they need to cover to blend in, or they feel that they might be judged, or for whatever reasons this is a challenge, that will make things harder. So I think part of really building inclusive cultures is to understand what drives these things, like covering, and what we can do to in our day to day help address those. I think microaggressions is another one. Those are not the big, here's my system and here's how I'm going to implement it. Microaggressions are things that are really small that happen day to day. With microaggressions are the kinds of things that people, it's not even none of these are big enough for people to go and articulate and complain or say this is wrong, but it's something that chips away or gives them a feeling of like, okay, maybe I'm not included. So that's another one, that when you think about how to build communities who are inclusive, is to watch out for that behavior, to call out that behavior. And I think each of us can play a role in it, because the role that we can play is we can be allies. If somebody is saying something that is a microaggression against Andrew, he might feel awkward or confrontational that he steps up to it, but like I might, as his ally, say like, you said that to Andrew, like, is this what you were trying to say? So I think understanding that you get, not that anybody would say that to you, Andrew, but like I think those are the kind of things that happen and I think like there's been situations, again, I always go back to my personal experience, where I've had that, where people have stood up for me, where like I was taken aback and I didn't know what to do. And I've had situations where I was not, and I was really missing, like somebody else needs to come in and say something because I can't. So I think it's a combination of all of those things. I think what I find is different people get why it's important in different ways. Like you would think there's a business case, but like it makes sense to some people, it doesn't make sense to somebody else. So you have to really appeal to the values and what is core to people to do these kind of things.
All right, thank you. A question from Chris. How do you address, or how does Microsoft address the specific challenges associated with ableism and with neurodiversity?
So at Microsoft, accessibility and kind of being able to support, and then we say accessibility, it's a much broader thing. It's not just about like physical disability and so forth, but really understanding people of all different aspects. We have a program around like physical disabilities for sure. We have a program around autism. We have a lot of other kind of similar related programs. I think, again, to do this, you need to provide people the support. You want to provide people the support. I think it starts from a place of like, this is core to who we are. I think our mission, like I said, helps in this, because we start from the position of like, we want to empower all people, not people who are this particular thing, but who think differently, whose minds work differently, who like look at this, and we support all of them, we empower all of them. And so when you start from a place like that, then you have to really think about how does it work, not just for a particular place, but all different kinds of abilities. So that's really the kinds of things that we think about. But it is hard. I think like places where we have had these challenges is because you had people on the team who weren't thinking about it. I think another one of the really great examples of people coming together is we have the annual Microsoft Hackathon. Microsoft Hackathon is really a grassroots, ground up effort where everybody in the company, and we have over 120,000 people or something like that, come together and they kind of hack for whatever they want. There is no top down directive. There is nothing to say that they want to be around this or that. And we always have some sort of a challenge from the executives on how do we help our products or just our culture be more inclusive. One of the projects, like, so the Seeing AI app that I mentioned came out of that. If you've all seen the Xbox adaptive controller, which is really of helping people, kids of all different types, that came from that. So we get a lot of our really good ideas from that. And so I think the other thing when you think about this is, how do you encourage and empower people at all levels? I guess that's the other one that I would think about in this kind of situation is, you want to make sure you have those teams, but then you need to empower those teams. You want to make sure that the good ideas bubble up. You need to do it in a systematic manner, but there is a cultural aspect to that as well.
Great, thank you. This one's from Ari Van Driessen. During COVID-19, many schools are using Microsoft Teams, thank you very much, for online education. What, if any, design considerations have gone into Teams in order to give school students the most inclusive experience?
I guess there's one particularly, but I think, like, because a lot of people, when they started school as a remote thing, like I said, I have a 5-year-old. She had to go do remote school. If anybody's ever tried to get a 5-year-old to sit in front of a screen and actually listen to a teacher, like, it doesn't happen, right? Like, I have to be the teacher in those cases. So I think, like, the challenges for having remote learning were all new to people. And so initially there wasn't a lot to being inclusive, but I think as we think of more and more and how that's helped, we have done more. There's a feature that we called Together Mode. Together Mode is this really amazing feature where, like, you have everybody's video, but you can have everybody's video show up in kind of one screen, making them feel like they're sitting in one environment. What it does is it basically crops out people and puts them on one canvas where they feel like they're sitting in an auditorium. Things like that really help people feel like the social aspect of the fact that they're together. So that's one of them. The other things that we've seen that showed up, some of them were already on the roadmap, but they accelerated. And I think that's true here as well, is things like raising your hand, because not everybody is going to be loud or everybody's going to step up. You want to be able to have environments for people who might be shy speak up. And we've actually seen some studies, which is very interesting. I was recently talking to our education team, and what they were saying was, what they found is that the students are actually far more engaged in remote learning than they are in person, because in person, it's one main medium. The teacher's presenting, and then you're having one conversation. In a Teams or an online setting, people are not only participating in that, but there is a side conversation where people who might not want to interrupt the flow are able to chime in, who are able to put things in that conversation, have that dialogue in chat itself. And that has encouraged more students to actually participate and be part of those conversations, because they feel that they can do it in a manner that suits somebody who might not be a very extroverted out there person. So there's definitely things there, and there's more work to be done there. I think for sure we need to keep thinking of how we create this environment. I think not just Teams, but another product that, like, I feel very personally strong about and very good about, that Microsoft's part of it, is Flipgrid. Flipgrid is a company that we acquired a few years ago, and Flipgrid is an educational program, again, which they use short form video in the academic way, where teachers will create a Flipgrid group and students are able to share what they're feeling or how they're thinking in a short form video. Like, you can think of it for TikTok in a more in an academic, more restricted, with enough guardrails kind of situation. And that's another one where we've actually really seen students who might not speak up in a big group setting, just against their camera, are able to speak up, reflect what they're saying. So there's all these kind of things that we're doing in this manner itself. But I think we need more ideas for sure.
Great, thank you. Now, an interesting question from Alex Arbrenik. How do you argue the economic benefits of diversity and inclusion for companies that are producing non-consumer facing products? So, like, if they make some kind of back-end server that nobody really sees, how do you change those arguments to convince that company that diversity and inclusion are important for their employees?
I think because everybody needs to, regardless of whether we build back end stuff, I think you eventually some business will be using your stuff. that will end up having some sort of customers, whether that's true for us. We built Azure. Should we be not diverse because Azure, somebody is using somebody's creating VMs on Azure, and really, like, is that an interesting one? And actually that's not the case, because I think when you think of diversity, it's not just diversity of like the end user product will be better because they're considering diversity, because I think responsible AI is a very obvious one. There's an actual impact. I think in general, when you have diversity, you have better ideas. Even if what you're building is VMs in the cloud, which really there is no end user experience it. When you sit down and you brainstorm a problem and how you want to solve it, if you have diversity, you will have people from different perspectives tackle the same problem. So just traditional problem solving is going to be much better because it's going to be out of the box. And I think that's the part that people should understand, like that it is important for everyone to understand. It's not because it's obviously easier when there's an end customer in mind, because then you have a direct connection and you do it. But I think the business case for diversity goes far beyond that. The business case for diversity goes the fact that, like, you have an organization which will think of all the ways that the servers can go down in the case of like Azure VMs, right? And and that kind of comes from different perspectives. That comes from the fact that I have used something in this way, or where I come from, here's how things are done, or I have these kind of special needs, and this will happen. So I anybody who says that it's not, I don't buy it. I think they haven't just thought hard enough. Yes, it's easier one way, but it's true across the board.
Great, thank you. Now let me ask you a challenging question from Paul Ralph. So, and I'll phrase it in a good way. Does the Microsoft's responsible AI practices include any process for refusing to do business with a company or government that might not have a very good human rights record? And how does that work?
Absolutely, we do that. Actually, so the responsible AI organization or ecosystem at Microsoft, this is part of it. We have a group called Sensitive Uses group as part of this, and the Sensitive Uses group does exactly that. Where something comes up where we think like somebody's asking us for business, but we're not sure if it meets with our principles and guidelines, it goes to the Sensitive Uses group, which is a body of lawyers and policymakers, but also researchers and engineers and practitioners who come together and kind of think through what this means. And the way they do it is it's very similar in that, is there precedent for it? Have we done this before? Does it make sense for our values? Is this what we want to stand for, given our mission, our culture? Like, because we also are very careful about the fact that this other companies might do that because their mission might be different or they're optimizing for something else. We would rather err on the side of caution. And so there have been very specific cases. We've had a case again where a particular police organization wanted to use facial recognition in their kind of, as they make arrests and so forth. And we said no. Like we don't want our facial recognition software used in policing or making arrests, because we don't feel that our software is reliable enough, because to the point it can have biases and so forth, and that is not what we want to encourage. So that was a very obvious case where we said no to. We've even done it in the case of, and I forget the name of this company, but we've done this in the case of partners. Like, there was a company based out of Israel that we had, that M12 had kind of invested in. So it wasn't even Microsoft. It was a startup that we had partnered with, and they were using our cognitive APIs for facial recognition and so forth. And so we did that, and we have in our legal binding to say that this software or our software can be used for this, it cannot be used for this. And so we already had that, we have that clause in all of our contracts. And I think it was a year or so past doing that partnership where a lot of people, human rights people, raised the flag to say that this company is building software that is used at checkpoints in the Palestine-Israel border, where they're using at checkpoints to screen people in and out. And that's a violation of human rights, or et cetera, et cetera. And so we actually we created an official investigation within Microsoft. We got outside auditors. And basically what we said was, is that actually happening? Because this violates our property rights of here's how you use it. We actually did that investigation. We found that company was in violation, that they were using it for something like that. And we pulled back our association with them. So we we absolutely, we put our money where our mouth is in this case. There are plenty of things that we say no to because it does not align with our values for how we think things should be done in an inclusive manner.
Great, thanks. And I want to ask one more follow-up to that. Does Microsoft's use of internet services to provide AI as a product make it easier or facilitate the ability to take away somebody's access to technology when we think they're violating our ethical guidelines?
I don't know if it helps or hinders. I think you need lots of checks and mechanisms. You need lots of checks and balances in the system. So you need a whole way of doing things. It's not that just because we're in the cloud or we're serving things that way, we can pull it out. Because the thing is, it's not like we're going to do it in secret. We're like, if we decide to the case of this company that we're not doing it, we file Brad Smith got in front of our entire employee audience and said, yes, we will open a case in this. And when we decide, when it was proven based on the audit that it's violating our terms of use, we were open, right? So I think there's you have to be a little, like, you need to use all the tools that you have.
Thank you, that's great. So let me ask one final question from Prem Devambu, and then we're gonna move everybody into the social break. So Prem's question is, engineers are trained to be rather rigid in their perspectives and focus on very strict definitions and precision. What are the challenges to training engineers to see things from other perspectives?
Oh, this is a very interesting thing. It's something that we face every day, and it comes up in all kinds of different ways. Like, I think, what it requires is, one, determination to say it needs to be done this way. Sometimes you have to be hard and say it needs to be done. In some other ways, you need to kind of show them things that make sense to me. I think that's the thing. If somebody is a database, is moved by data, you need to show them data. If somebody is go by the emotional connection, you have to connect with them on kind of the emotional level. So I think you need to really think of all different ways in which you kind of get connect with people. One of the things where actually we struggle with this on a very regular basis is when people say, oh, there are no diverse, like, I want to hire a researcher, like, there are no diverse researchers in my systems or whatever, make something up, right? Space. And because like, when I go and hire and I get all these resumes, they're all men, right? So of course, like, there is no diversity. It's not my problem. Like, if they were diverse candidates, I would hire diverse candidates on my team. And I think, like, really pushing on them to say, no, it's still your problem. Like, the problem means that you maybe have not looked hard enough. Maybe you need to go think of kind of in your particular area or your particular space, more work needs to be done to get those. And frankly, like, I disagree with the fact that if you've looked hard enough and you haven't found anybody, like, it doesn't work. I think what you might have found is somebody who doesn't meet the exact specification of what you think in your mind is the right person. Maybe they're from a top institution. Maybe they've done a PhD in a very particular thing. Maybe you need to broaden your horizon, because people come up with all kinds of different perspectives, and sometimes they might and that's when we say non-traditional talent, because they still add a whole bunch of value, maybe not the exact same one that you think that you want. So I think that's one of it. But I completely agree. Like, engineers, researchers, all kinds of folks we've all grown up doing things a certain way, and we like to do things a certain way. I think what has, like, at the macro level, what I'll say, at least at Microsoft, the culture has changed. I've been at Microsoft for like 19 years. How people were treated previously versus, or what were expected of them then versus in the past couple of years with Satya, is like very different. Like, the very simple thing, even for me, I'm a female, but even for me, this perspective, like, I grew up as an engineer. I started Microsoft in Windows CE, like, in 2001. There were no women there. Like, I used to like it, but it was never something top of mind. It never occurred to me. I wouldn't walk into a room and say, like, there are no women here, what's going on? Like, why don't we have this? Why am I the only person? And nobody else expected that. When they hired people certain ways. So I guess I got lucky. But now it is an active dialogue. When we walk into a conversation, like, it's very interesting. I spent a lot of time in meetings with senior leadership. We had a meeting where we had a particular group from Microsoft. This was before COVID, so it was all in person. A particular group came and presented, and it was like 40 people in a room with Kevin, all white men. Like, I was like the only woman, and one other person who had walked in with me was a female. And like, that was such a stark an obvious thing to, like, you had to call it out. Like in a previous world, you never would have. I think the realization, like, I'm not saying the review needs to stop or something you need to do, but like acknowledge that this is a problem. And what was interesting, as I was walking out of the room, I told Kevin, like, did you see the amount of like white men in there? And he was like, yeah, what do you expect? This is FU team. This is kind of, they've grown up over the years. And I think that dialogue is the first thing you need to do, to be able to acknowledge your biases and what's happening. And then after that, you kind of work towards correcting that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Well, that's all the time we have for questions today. I'd like to thank Fatima again for a wonderful talk and for answering all of our questions. So thank you so much.
And let's wave at her or clap at, she can't hear us clapping, so maybe give her some waves.
Yeah, to the jazz hands.
And thanks again, Fatima. That was awesome. I really enjoyed it. And if you're interested, of course, you're welcome to join us in the social hour. I want to give everybody just a heads up. In the social hour or the coffee break, which is right after this session, this is kind of a shorter one because in an hour we have another session. I want everybody to head over to Discord. Okay, there's coffee breaks rooms 1, 2, 3, and 4. Head over to Discord. We're going to all hang out. Remember, if you just were here on the webinar and you just go back to your normal work, nobody knows you were here. There's no networking going on. And that is a huge part of conferences and also of your career. So I'd really encourage you to go over to the Discord rooms and talk right now. But first, we're going to go ahead and dance ourselves out of this session. So anybody that's got their video on, feel free to dance. Thanks again for the great talk. Hope you all have a great day.